Hello, everybody. Welcome to the fourth in the series of At the Table. This evening, UK time, we're joined by Naomi Rincón Gallardo. She is going to be in conversation with Beatriz Lobo Britto, Gutiérrez, and Nina Hoechtl. We're having a few technical difficulties. We understand something has happened with Eventbrite not sending out the link, but we're on the case and are resolving it. And I can see the numbers of people tuning in are growing as I speak. As well as the panelists this evening, we have British Sign Language with Julie Doyle and Nikki Harris. They're showing themselves on their screen now, so you're able to recognize them. And to introduce myself, I'm Nigel Prince. I'm the director of Artists Mundi. I'm a middle-aged man with a shaved head, a sort of slightly graying, scrubbly beard, clear frame glasses, and I'm wearing a brown crew neck sweater. When the participants come on the screen, you will see they are quite literally immersed in the imagined worlds that Naomi creates in her work. So this is certainly, tonight's conversation is really going to be very much a journey through and into and an examination of those created, mythical, imagined worlds that Naomi creates in the videos that are on display, and in the drawings that are on display, and in the sculptural pieces, all on exhibition at Chapter in Cardiff. So without any further delay, oh sorry, I should just re-mention the detail. We're also joined by Maria on closed captioning, and as Letty has already mentioned, there is the icon in the menu bar at the bottom of your screen. You can click on to access them, or there is the link that has been posted in the chat. So I'm going to disappear from your screen now, hand over to Naomi, ask her and the panelists to switch on video, and I'll join you back at the end. Bye for now.
Good evening. Many thanks for hosting us and being with us this evening. It's been an honor and a privilege to be part of this cohort of artists of Artists Mundi 10, and I'm very happy to have this talk today with Beatriz Lobo, Laura Gutiérrez, and Nina Hoechtl. My name is Naomi Rincón Gallardo. I use she, her as a pronoun, but the asterisk to expand such category is welcome. I'm a feminist Mexican visual artist who works and lives between Oaxaca and Mexico City. Right now, I'm standing in front of some Mesoamerican figures, skeletal figures who are posing in front of a stone wall. I'm a mixed race brown queer person in her mid-40s with black short hair and 3 or 4 piercings in each ear. For Artists Mundi, I'm presenting the Tzitzimime trilogy, which is a trilogy of video works installed along with sculptures and drawings. The 3 works imagine different iterations of Tzitzimimes who descend to Earth and find themselves in a moment of planetary cataclysm and eco-social collapse. I don't know if Letty, you can show the image of a Tzitzimime because I don't see it right now. No? Well, the Tzitzimime...
One moment, I'll join it now.
All right. The Tzitzimimes are skeletal demons who appear in painted manuscripts from the 16th century in colonial central Mexico. You can see here one of such demons. They have bleeding mouths, threatening tongues that are like knives, and the necklace made out of hearts and tiny hands, and the 2 snakes run between their legs. They are voracious creatures of darkness who descend to earth in moments of cosmic danger when it was feared that an eternal night is approaching. The trilogy is formed by the works Verses of Filth from 2021, Sonnet of Vermin from 2022, and Eclipse from 2023. The three works unfold mythical, political underworlds born from the necropolis that Mexico has turned into over the last 2 decades. Since the so-called war against narco or against drug cartels unleashed plural forms of unofficial wars involving naturalized violence, dispossession, disappearances, killings, forced displacement, and the multiplication of military and paramilitary forces. You can jump to the next image. The landscapes of these worlds are populated by arms rising from the grave as reminders that there were stories that were unjustly interrupted. Right now you see an image that is inspired by a goddess called Tlaltecutli. Sorry, I will write it down here. Tlaltecutli. She's upside down in a stone, is a square stone, and there's an arm coming out from her vagina. So the Tzitzimimes, together with undead arms and a legion of animals from the Mesoamerican underworld, which are vultures, bats, snakes, scorpions, frogs, obsidian butterflies, seek for relationality, return, and revolt. So let me briefly talk about each of the works in more detail. So could you, Letty, please play some snippets from Verses of Filth? So in Verses of Filth, a disoriented Mesoamerican deity related to death in childbirth, who is known as Cihuateteo, has become a scavenger digging in the wasteland in search of residues of fragmented bodies and cultural debris. Together with a gang of vultures, she sparks up an insurrection of a brigade of undomesticated arms and underworld creatures who reclaim to become undead in the search for touch and pleasure. In Mesoamerican worldviews, the vultures are sacred animals who access the underworld when they put their heads into the corpses. So the Verses of Filth refers to a Mesoamerican funerary chant that was called Tzocuicatl, which is an eschatological ritual aiming on the one hand to drain the filth and the stench of the dead body, and on the other hand, to accompany the pain caused by the death of a beloved person. So in Sonnet of Vermin, could you play some snippets of Sonnet of Vermin? A legion of unwanted creatures related to the Mesoamerican underworld attempt to tune with one another through radio antennas in the midst of a planetary environmental catastrophe. There's a bat who broadcasts frequencies from a tomb with the help of a funerary bundle, which is also a radio. A group of frogs/children have adapted to toxicity and demand another dose of pesticide. A twisted scorpion performs the role of a bad omen who claims for the right of infection. A snake sheds her skin while she announces the transformation of the cycles. A telluric alligator devours all what she finds on her way, and all of them seek for a sort of subaltern solidarity and queer relationality as a form of re-existence within the ruins. Okay, the third part of the trilogy is called Eclipse. Well, now we're looking at some snippets of the Sonnet of Vermin, but now we'll jump to Eclipse. In eclipse, Mesoamerican mythical figures related to death, blood, and dismemberment appear in the moment when the moon devours the sun. There's a beheaded young man who is training a military routine while he alternates these moves with a choreography of exhaustion and feminization. Here you see this decapitated man with snakes coming out from his neck. A group of obsidian butterflies from the nocturnal and subterranean world emerge from their chrysalids to find themselves in a threatened landscape. Collectively, the butterflies conjure up a bloodthirsty turkey sorceress, a sort of Mesoamerican female vampire. A flowering tree, which is another character of the eclipse, is the sustain of the world, the support of the world, but it breaks and bleeds. So the eclipse was considered to be a dangerous cosmic event when it was feared that night will prevail forever and the Tsitsimimes will appear and will come down to the earth to devour all men. So this is pretty much what the show is about.
Wow, thank you so much, Naomi. That's that's really incredible to hear from you, actually. So hello everyone. I'm Beatriz Lobo Britto. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a brown Latina woman with curly hair in my very late 20s, wearing a bright green hoodie. And I'm a curator at iniva, the Institute of International Visual Arts. And I wanted to say, obviously, huge thank you for everyone for joining us today. And also maybe just take a little moment just to recognize how the world is in a pretty difficult state. And I think it's safe to say that most of us are really exhausted from witnessing necropolitics continue to be exercised across the world, while we are also forced to continue with our lives. So I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge every single person who might be sharing this feeling. And this also leads me to my first question to Naomi. I think it is important for us to discuss issues of violence right now, and recognize that this is also a colonial imposition as we reflect on what kind of violences we have come to accept. So Naomi, I know that your work draws inspiration from Rita Laura Segato, who suggests relationality and community building as strategies to counter pedagogies of cruelty. And we could also think of the notion of necropolitics here. So I wanted to ask, how do you exercise Segato's suggestions in your practice? And I'm particularly interested in how you build and nurture your communities and your communities' ideas, feelings, desires, and needs, and how they're manifested in your work.
Yes. Thank you for the questions, Beatriz. We're indeed immersed in a very dangerous moment where many life worlds are becoming unbreathable, unbearable. And we're also witnessing, and we are part of, a moment in which we are increasingly confronted with intensified exclusionary arrangements that render more and more human and non-human populations as disposable. And as you rightly said, we know that territories that have been colonized often become zones of sacrifice, extracted zones ruled by necropower. And as Rita Laura Segato says, Latin American is a violent continent, and particularly in terms of concealed or informal wars, informal forms of war that have to do with the accumulation of capital through non-declared sources. And within these non-official forms of war, there's the rule of the command of patriarchy that rule through various forms of domination and control over territories and over bodies. And I say bodies here because, interested as I am in queer theory and feminism, I think that debates around sexuality get troubled when they are located in sites where bodies of women and queer bodies are exposed to very expressive forms of cruel punishment and expressive violence. So Rita Laura Segato's notion of pedagogies of cruelty is very important in my practice. She defines the pedagogy of cruelty as the acts and practices that teach and program subjects to turn life, nature, and territories and bodies into property through processes of control, of extraction, and processes of subordination. So the pedagogies of cruelty comprise the constitutive elements of the patriarchal order. So it's the command of masculinity, low empathy, cruelty, insensitivity, bureaucracy, detachment, formality, alienation, and very limited bonding. So Segato's proposition of the counter-pedagogies of cruelty have to do with the project of creating communitarian bonds, to nourishing proximity, connectedness, and relationality. And this is something I long for in my work. In my work, I somehow extend an invitation to others to create sometimes ephemeral, sometimes long-lasting forms of collective belonging, collective creative belonging. And it's also a sort of a queer promise of something else, of something vibrant and pleasurable, a queer horizon that sustains our lives despite the darkness of our times, as José Esteban Muñoz has claimed, this queer horizon. So when I plan my works, I think of them as if I was cooking up a celebration or a party. So in this sense, I'm also influenced by Audre Lorde's ideas on the uses of the erotic or the erotic as power, a power or a resource that can provide the energy and the joy to sustain relationships and to practice a politics that take intimacy seriously. So I'm in my work, I'm interested, well, in my work and in my life, right? I'm interested in ways in which we can together cultivate possibilities of recasting forms of encounter in ways in which these encounters somehow rearrange the hierarchical symbolic orders of coloniality, in ways in which we can produce other forms of togetherness that can transform our subjectivities and that can create forms of collective rituality. I don't know if I responded to the question.
Yeah, incredible. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you might be. Thank you for that short presentation, Naomi, and that wonderful first engagement with Beatriz. I feel like I'm learning a lot. I feel like I should be taking notes at this moment. But as always, I'm always learning from you. I feel like you're my professor. But I am Laura Gutiérrez. I am, in fact, a university professor at the University of Texas in Austin. So I am in unceded territory in Turtle Island. I'm a middle-aged Latina, brown-skinned Latina with wearing a black top that matches the background in some way. My background is a still from Eclipse, the third part of the Tizemine trilogy that we're here to talk about. And it's two obsidian butterflies with their wings spawned and wide eyes and gaping mouth, if you can see. And in fact, I want us to sort of talk a little bit more in depth about your creatures, your monsters, your freaks, your underworld and otherworld beings, Naomi, your bastardized or queer lineup of characters in the three pieces, the Tizemines or the Tizemine-like figures. A good number of them are based on deities, and others are on, as you mentioned in your intro, on characters from Mesoamerican mythologies. So their characterizations are already in our contemporary language abject, sort of this desire for you to sort of like unearth the object, I think, or bring it to light is one thing I want to talk about. But in recreating or reimagining them, you bring them into being, you insert other references to up the ante in terms of queerness, in terms of abjection, or other non-normative features or characteristics. They come into new focus through your work, when they come face to face with a society that has normalized violence, as you just answered in terms of the pedagogies of cruelty. So, for example, as you talked about in Versos de Porquería or Verses of Filth, you reimagine the Cihuateteo by morphing her into a cyborg-like pepenadora or scavenger vulture who's searching among the refuse ruins and comes to unearth fragments of body parts. And other times you create really camping characters that are fun to watch. And I love to be immersed in your world, like the femme bat that is also a broadcaster, but also has very visible sex or vagina or genitalia, right? In Soneto de Alimañas, the Sonnets of Vermin. Anyway, can you talk about your creative decisions in imagining and making your characters?
Oh, thank you very much, Laura, for acknowledging the freakery and the queer monstrosity of my work. Indeed, the creatures are inspired by Mesoamerican figures, and they assemble female, male, anthropomorphic features together with other powers of the terrestrial, the aquatic, the cosmic. And this legion of freaks, they exceed modern colonial systems of classification, right? They mix and match different forces, different affects, different energies, different temporalities, and different materialities. So they are queer because they disobey gender binarism and the human-animal divide. And they also embody the desire of a sort of interspecies connectivity. Mm-hmm. But they also gather elements of the living and the death. They are like a sort of in a Frankensteinian style. So this troop of monsters is born out of the injustice, is born out of toxic environments and asymmetrical distribution of violence. Here now you're seeing this woman Turkey sorceress holding her legs, and this figure is inspired by let me write it down before I forget. Mometso Pinke, by this Mesoamerican female vampire, the Mometzopinke, who is a woman, who is half woman, half turkey, who detaches her legs at night and she goes flying to suck the blood of men. And so in my works, yes, I was saying that I'm interested in overlaying not only different materialities and different realms, but also different temporalities. For me, the notion by Cristina Rivera Garza about the geological writing is useful to describe these simultaneous layers of experience, of matter, and of temporalities. So, for example, the Cihuateteo, this pepenadora scavenger cyborg that you just mentioned, is inspired on the Mexica spirit of a woman who died in childbirth. And in Mesoamerica, childbirth is related to, or is equivalent to combat or to war. So the Cihuateteo in Verses of Filth is at the same time a deity, but she's also a contemporary scavenger. And she's also a surrealist collector of found objects. She's also my alter ego. It's a character who is, collecting different elements, different things to match them and mix them together. And at the same time, she is, I will use a word in Spanish, a buscadora, a searcher of disappeared bodies. Mm-hmm. So she allies and entangles her body with a vulture. And as I said, the vulture is a sacred creature who is the great purifier, who cleanses the stench of the world. But you see, she also is wearing a jacket. And the jacket has a painted, stitched here on the back. And in the back, in the painting, the whole narrative is depicted. So there are several encrypted meanings that are attached to her jacket, as if it was a sort of codex, Mesoamerican codex, but also it, resembles somehow the DIY punk culture. And simultaneously, I wanted to invoke the spirit of Isabel Cabanillas, who was a feminist activist and artist from Ciudad Juárez, who was a victim of femicide. And she was an artist who loved fashion, and she would make paintings on jackets. She would make paintings on t-shirts and on jeans and trousers. So I wanted to continue her practice, or to invoke her spirit in an encrypted object. So also in Verses of Filth, this Cihuateteo, when she's looking for things, like looking down at the earth, digging in the soil, she finds a figure that recalls the telluric monster Tlaltecutli, sorry. And so I was thinking of the discovery of the Tlaltecutli. She was found in an archaeological site in Templo Mayor in 2006. They were digging in this archaeological site, and they found this fantastic colossal sculpture, this figure, this stone sculpture. So I was thinking of that, but also simultaneously I was thinking that archaeologists nowadays in Mexican territory are also deviating their practice. So they not only look for, remainings of ancient figures, but they are also sharing their knowledges for to buscadores, with the searchers who are looking for the disappeared ones and in clandestine graves, right? So there are several narratives that are overlapping. So the Tlaltecutli is simultaneously an abjected body who has been trashed and buried. But when she's found, she starts singing. She doesn't keep her mouth shut. She insists on keep telling her story, on keep enjoying, finding a rhythm. And well, just to move on to another project, I could mention that in Sonnet of Vermin, all characters have these radio antennas attached to their bodies or to their heads. And the antennas allow them to tune with the others, but also with the frequencies that are coming from the underworld. And here I was thinking of the autonomous radio stations as tools for political organization from below. And I could go on saying that, that the bat is an underworld creature that is connected or related to the capitation, because you see that the bats fly and they snatch like some fruits from the trees. And so when they carry the fruits, it's as if they were carrying a head. But the bats are also great pollinators. They facilitate interspecies symbiotic mutualism. So there are different mythological, cultural, political energies and temporalities that I assemble in order to create these illegible monsters. And there's also a process of building this very crafty, low cost and elaborated paraphernalia. So I embrace some degraded aesthetics that involve no mastery at all, but inventive, intuitive capacities. So I eclectically combine plastic, cardboard, LED lights, polyester, feathers, wood, natural fibers, clay, metal. So for me, putting together all these disparate materials becomes an exercise of an intuitive queer plasticity, that comprises saturation, impurities, Baroque constructions, and they always stand insufficiently abstract, insufficiently beautiful, but they are Baroque and exuberant. So yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Naomi and Beatriz, Laura, for your brilliant questions, but also for your very generous answers, Naomi, to let you into your worlds, into the underworlds you create. And yes, as you said, Laura, it's always a moment of unlearning. And here I am, a head, a whitey head, or a güera head, as you would say in Mexico. I write it down, the word güera, because I'm a whitey person who has been the last 17 years been sticking out her head from what is nowadays called Mexico. And I'm embedded by all different things that were already mentioned. For example, to my left, I have a book, or is it my right? I'm lost already. A book of Laura Rita Segato. And then on top of my head, we have the jacket that Naomi mentioned, where there's also an arm sticking out that is a bit too small. And there's also my arm coming in, and there's another arm. So yeah, there are all these arms. My arm is also disappearing, all these arms that are coming out. And it is a still from what was also already mentioned. And that's also why I'm saying my head is sticking out of fields. It's the verses of fields. So the versus de porcaria. Y aquí me gusta. And here I really like the word porcaria. It has a different sense to it, no, than fields, at least for me. So yes, Naomi's, and perhaps also to say that, yeah, I'm an artist and I had the possibility to many times already to collaborate with you, Naomi's, and also in other occasions to exchange our point of views, our different positionings and enunciations. And so, yeah, it was already mentioned that Mesoamerica provides a very fertile ground for speculation for you. But on another occasion, you have shared that for you, what is very important is that this ground for speculation has to be done always in direct touch with its materialities. And here, these are all the materialities, some of them you already mentioned, no? It's like the uninhabitable spaces, the wastelands, the toxic ruins, and the underworld. And there are, as we also have already heard, arms. And Sarah Ahmed, she would call this arm willful arms, broken arms that rise time and again from the soil, from the earth, from all the toxicity. And here I will quote Ahmed: "The arm, a ghost, a menace, a trace. If she persists, she is willful, and her arm comes up. When a history is not over, their arm comes up. Their arm testifies to the survival of willfulness after the death of the body of which it is a part. This is why willfulness acquires different valences when understood as a Black feminist and a feminist of color inheritance." And in relation to this quote, I would like to ask if you could talk a little bit more about your inheritance and how it informs your practice, and about what the arms in your videos testify to. What connections do they willfully sustain?
Yeah, well, thank you, Nina. Well, the arms raising from the tomb are a trope in the horror films, no? They are, and the arms raising from the soil, from the earth in my works, insist on clenching into fists as a sign of protest, but also they not only want to protest, they also are trying to connect with others. They try to caress other hands, other arms. They sometimes appear repairing something, painting something, documenting something, snapping, or holding books that give an account of their existence. So the very textured landscapes, as you well said, full of toxicity and debris and ruins, they're almost like composts of fragmented bodies, toxic substances, but also suppressed knowledges and worldviews. So you're asking what these arms testify, and I think they testify the desire to raise the death, the insistence to walk with the death, and to provoke, as Sayak Valencia, I'm very clumsy with this writing down the...
I can write it down,
Sayak Valencia. Mexican philosopher Sayak Valencia calls the post-mortem insurrection, a post-mortem insurrection, an insurrection that keeps the death among us and the desire to de-necropolitize our existences. There's also this willful refusal to forget, and the need to take care of the living and to take care of the death. And at the same time, there is an insistence an insistence to look down, to look at the ground, to be grounded, to excavate, to dig in the soil, to reach deeper layers of time and matter, and ultimately to open cracks on the ground. So I think my work sometimes has exercises of excavation, but also of resurrection. So you talked about the willful arm, but I would say that also matter, rubble, ruins, debris are stubborn and willful materiality.
Thanks a lot, Naomi. I was about to say muchas gracias, you see. And perhaps also in this willfulness of all the different materialities, how they come up time and again, how they create a different form of togetherness, no? What you have also already discussed. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nina.
Yeah, wow. Well, I guess you already spoke a little bit about violences around extractivism. Also, you're just touching on ideas of ruins right now. So I guess that's a good moment to build on that. So Carolyn Fornoff describes extractivism as the impetus for mass enslavement, territorial destruction, the extinction of peoples and ecologies. And she really says how we must reckon with how modernity was produced through extractivism. But I also wanted to bring Emily Jacqueline Brown, who also talks about extractivism, saying that it is a cosmology. It's a worldview that holds capitalist accumulation as its core value. And here I'm particularly looking at Sonnet of Vermin, which is just behind me, which openly speaks about environmental collapse caused by extractivism. But also I'm thinking about some of your previous works like opossum resilience. So I guess my question has two parts, and I hope that's not cheating. The first part, I would love to hear more about your research process in identifying and deciding which specific issues you will explore, such as when you're investigating a mining site, for example. And I would also be interested in thinking of those other cosmologies that you're building through processes of resistance and how you are observing them in your work. So you speak about solidarity and relationality within the ruins, for example. And I'm thinking about the ruins not only as archaeological, like you talk about excavation, and that's really related to the ruins, but also environmental ruins, thinking about sites that have moved to post-extractivism, for example. So could you maybe expand on that and what kind of cosmologies you're observing within the ruins?
Beatriz, thank you for your amazing, thoughtful questions. All right, you are talking about extractivism, and I agree that it's a worldview, it's a cosmology, and it plays a central role in the stories I craft. And yes, the extractivist mindset or worldview understands the planet as a vacant corporate bioterritory that is ready or available for extraction and control and subordination and appropriation. So in that sense, to a large extent, colonial expansion continues to be a planetary project. So there's a question, the question of to whom the earth belongs has been the question that underlies colonialism and still lingers in the present. So I firmly believe that we need other cosmologies to oppose that worldview. We need other worldviews, other ontologies and forms of relationality that oppose the extractive mind. So with regards to the ways in which I identify the topics I address in my work, well, I have to confess that this is it's a process that is not linear at all. But I can share with you some of the ways in which I gather some of the guiding elements of my research or my practice. So I'm pretty much influenced by Paulo Freire's pedagogy of the oppressed since a very early age. He's accompanying me for more than 30 years now. And specifically in the ways in which he proposes to seek for a thematic universe that is grounded on a specific context in order to create an image that can spark a cultural and political dialogue. And you know that Augusto Boal then followed with Paulo Freire's teachings and created or developed this idea of the theater of the oppressed. Augusto Boal. Yes, so I keep my senses alert to my existential, social, and political surroundings. So I read, I walk, I talk, I join demonstrations, I attend dialogical encounters, to identify what are the topics that are, pulsating under the ground I'm standing on. And in a very different vein, I'm also interested in surrealism and the possibility to welcome chance, unexpected encounters, to recollect objects that I find in my way. And I also believe in the power of dreams. So I collect lots of impressions, materials, phrases that haunt me in dreams. So that's another way in which I, decide in which affective state I will work, or with which topics, through the power of dreams and surrealism and the unconsciousness. And thirdly, I try to revive, scavenge, excavate certain stories and knowledges that have been buried, interrupted, or discarded. So you mentioned Sonnet of Vermin and the environmental collapse. So when I was writing the lyrics and the script of Sonnet of Vermin, there was a tremendous garbage collection crisis in Oaxaca, in the city I live in. So as the garbage dump in the city was overflooded, the garbage trucks were pouring all residues in the already polluted Atoyac River in Oaxaca. And I learned that frogs and amphibians are very good indicators of ecological disturbance, because they absorb all toxins through the skin. So that is how I imagine these paranormal children frogs who are learning to metabolize all the toxins of the fecal rivers with drug-resistant bacteria. So these frog children mutate, and instead of aspiring to reproductive futurity, they just want another fix of cadmium. You see them here. They are with their neon faces, wearing these frog helmets covered with electronic garbage, in front of a snake that is holding garbage bags with water. Supposedly in Mesoamerica, the frogs are the ones who help to bring the rain. When they sing, they help to bring the rain. So that's what they are doing in this image. So the frogs here, they become tenacious, they become willful, they become enduring, and they learn how to live within the ruins. So, connecting this with the idea of ruins, I think that, well, if I think of ruins, I think of decay and the material remains of a live world. So perhaps ruins and rubble are carriers of persistence, of memory, of a pulsating past that is unfinished. So ruins are this affective matter, all textures, and it's a matter that is stubborn. They insist on not being fully destroyed. And I think that is what ruins can teach us in these moments of collapse and cataclysm.
Thank you so much, Naomi. I think maybe Nina, do you want to go next?
Okay, I thought it would be you, Laura, sorry. So it's like, yeah, sure. I was just still in my thought, and I thought, yeah, it's a lot to take in and to reflect upon. And one thing you already mentioned is the craftiness, no? The craftiness, the handcraftiness of your props, and that you mentioned the interest you have in DIY. And so a lot of these handcrafted narrative tropes are not only influenced by horror films, as you mentioned in relation to the arms, but also science fiction. And in particular, I would say like the sci-fi cinema from Mexico, films that were produced from 1945 and 1918. 1918, oof, I was traveling back in 1918. And I actually, as I have already in the picture that is that I'm immersed in, that my head sticks out, a book to my left or right, I will try to show, if I manage, because it's like an image from this book that is from Italia Schmelz, El Futuro Más Acá. It's like she's a curator and a researcher from Mexico who has been digging into sci-fi, and in this book she's saying like that all these sci-fi movies, they have cardboard backdrops, recycled sets, spaceships hanging from fishing line, a nightly visible zipper on a monster's costume, a chemistry lab that looked like a children's toy set. And all these things contributed to creating a very peculiar aesthetic, which is only now, and this was already 10 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, when this book came out, beginning to capture the interest. And here I would add, Naomi, definitely your passion since years. And so I would like to ask you, what do these sci-fi tropes allow you to do in your practice? And in your practice, both in relation to a tool that Saidiya Hartman proposes to make productive sense of gaps and silences, in relation to all the Mesoamerican methodology that you bring up. So the tool Saidiya Hartman proposes is called critical fabulation, but as you also made clear, you are digging into the myth historical research, no? So I would like to know how do these sci-fi tropes, this handcrafted sci-fi, hi-fi tropes play into your practice in that sense. And yeah, I think, Laura, it was you, no, who mentioned the bastardizing myth. That's like a term that you coined, Naomi, in relation to your process. And I think it might also make sense to explore that a bit in relation to your use of sci-fi tropes, if this makes sense. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nina. Well, there are many questions in one.
Sorry.
So let me speak. I will try to follow. Well, I'm interested in myths, and there's a huge myth, or one of the most damaging myths or creeds of our times is the creed of development and progress. No, as we mentioned earlier, this worldview that understands the planet as a resource to be extracted and turned into capital. So my work is concerned with telling entangled stories of those who create the obstacles for the progress, those who create obstacles for development, or more precisely, those who become themselves the obstacles. So those who are rendered, or those of us who are rendered as useless, backwarded, inferior, undeveloped, deviated, unwanted, unproductive, superstitious, unclean, and disposable. So as you said, Italia Schmelz, you know me very well, has been quite influential in my practice for the way she analyzes Mexican sci-fi as smoking parodies, where the lack of resources is replaced with a farcical allegory that weakens the belief in progress and modernity. No, and she draws on Ecuadorian philosopher Bolívar Echeverría, who has described the Baroque ethos as a resistance to what modernity imposed on Mesoamerican and Andean conquered worlds. So the Baroque ethos sabotages and resists the impositions of capitalist modernity. So it's a result of cultural mestizaje, appropriation of the Western mindset through a parodic staging and imitation without belief. So about the tropes of sci-fi, so the futures, the question of future, along with the trope of time travel, have been central to sci-fi. And my fabulation also works in these ideas of working against non-linear notions of time. So here I will bring Bolivian feminist subaltern theorist Silvia Rivera Cusicanqui, who says that colonized societies with an indigenous presence walk with the past in front of our eyes and with the future on the back, as the past is what we know and recognize, and the past therefore is unfinished. And and she calls also for creating a visual culture that could work as flashbacks to pre-colonial times that can spark a critical understanding or a critical view on coloniality. And you also mentioned Saidiya Hartman's notion of critical fabulation. And I relate to this notion because she talks about the possibility of telling stories or telling counter stories with and against an archive of violence. And she asks which kind of stories can we tell within these dark times as forms of compensations or even reparations or counter stories that illuminate our intimacy with the lives of the dead. And I will just connect that with what scholar Ileana Diegues says, well, or she calls for the ethical and affective and political challenge to turn the work of the dead, the work of necropolitics into a work of a gaze, the gaze that dares to tell the horror of our times. I don't know if there was something that I missed from the question, perhaps the idea of Mesoamerican myths, I think
I think it's totally fine. We can keep on going. Thank you so much, Naomi.
Well, I can quickly say something about bastardizing myths. I mean, I'm interested in Mesoamerican myths because for me, they offer passages to other forms of understanding the connections between the dead and the living. And because in Mesoamerican cosmologies, all substances are connected in a sort of reciprocal relation. And these myths you can find in the present. You can find them in cultural practices, in festivities, in the food, in hybrid Baroque celebrations in the streets. You can find them in songs, in different cultural practices. However, I also think that myths sometimes can contribute to reinforce narratives of domination, exclusion, or even punishment. So I think that bastardizing myths is a way that allows us to shake off the oppressive content and traditional values that could nullify the world-making possibilities for non-normative bodies, genders, and sexualities, for instance. So I think of myths that also claim for the right to not belong. And here I relate to José Esteban Muñoz's notion of disidentification as an anti-assimilationalist maneuver that allows queers of color to refuse and resist essentialized identities, and instead insisting on diving or exploring ambivalences and contradictions in order to problematize them and expand them. So it's a strategy that works simultaneously with and against certain social and cultural practices.
Thank you so much, Naomi.
So I wonder, just like Nina is completely right. There's you're giving us so much. I feel so enriched by every time you speak to any of our questions. But I wonder if I could steer us to see less and hear more. I don't think we've talked a lot about the importance of sound and music in your pieces. So yeah, I mean, you've been talking about, you know, the visual aesthetics behind your creatures, your freaks that I love. But you know, the music and sound in general have a particular function. I mean, you also talked a lot about world making, right? And the ways in which you want to center in some way celebration, right? And music is part of those celebrations. And you know, and what I mean, they could be for any reasons. And I just kind of like think about, you know, in the context that you live and the importance of music in Oaxaca for any occasion. There's always music, right? So I know I've experienced that with you in multiple occasions. But I wonder, like, then if you can sort of steer us to hear your work and how that functions in your storytelling, in your reimagining or creating these bastardized myths that you just spoke about. I mean, and also like in these pieces, there's also sonic poetic language that we haven't talked about. I mean, even two of the titles are you know, verses of filth and then sonnet, like it references poetry, but in so many ways it's poetry not to be read but to be heard. So yeah. And then you mentioned earlier also the DIY punk aesthetics, right? So it's not just visual aesthetics, but it's also sonic, right? So there's a moment in which like we're like punk, you know, in a sort of a punk music moment with you through your work. So sorry, yeah, music and sound in your work.
Music and sound. Well, I'm not an expert in music at all, but I'm a melomaniac, and many elements, not only music, also other elements in my practice are a result of a creative collaboration with other artists. And the sound indeed has become a crucial element in the videos. And the way in which I built it really follows the internal logic of each project. So I have to mention some of my good friends and collaborators. I work very closely with Enrique Arriaga, who is Enrique. Let me write it down. Sorry, Enrique Arriaga, who is, as you see, I'm very bad in multitasking.
I could do that if you want. I can write it.
It's
Okay.
ready, it's ready. Enrique Arriaga, who is a visual artist and a sound artist. And we've been working together for almost 10 years now. So the sound in the work is multi-layered. It combines direct sound, acoustic sounds recorded in the studio, and loads of electronic sound effects produced in the studio with analog synths, theremins, pedals, etc. So we create these polyphonic ensembles, thinking of keeping all senses alert. alert to things that are happening perhaps outside of the frame, and to hear to other voices that perhaps are not on the screen, but are perhaps, you know, beating underneath, and create this kind of eerie atmosphere. And what I find fascinating about sound is that it pierces your body directly. You know, you can close your eyes, but you cannot close your ears. So it pierces your body, and it's somehow ethereal and visceral, and very visceral at the same time. So as for the texts, I write all the texts in my works, and sometimes I imagine them as oratory elements. Sometimes they become lyrics for songs. Sometimes they are just indistinct, encrypted layers of noise. There sounds, I mean, they are texts that you would sense, but you don't get to hear what they really say. So in the process of writing the scripts, I usually organize simultaneously the text, the description of the scene, the visual elements, and a verbal description of the sonicscape. So how one describes a sound through words and images. So that becomes like a challenge of translation. And this process of translation, I work with Enrique Arriaga and with Federico Schmuckler in the studio. So I describe the sound atmosphere that I imagine for each scene. I always love to create playlists, so I bring playlists as references, and there's always a gap between what I imagine and what the other brings in, and that's the beauty of collaboration. And as for the music, I don't play any instrument. I don't have any music training, but the music, however, singing with others has been a central part of my emotional and affective, and I would even dare to say my political upbringing. So for the musical composition, as I said, I usually collaborate, or my most steady collaborator has been Federico Schmuckler. I write the lyrics, and when I'm writing the text, I somehow know which kind of music would correspond to the words. So I bring in some references. So it goes from Latin American protest songs to punk rock, to hip hop, to traditional folk songs. Music allows me to navigate different emotional scopes. And I like to bring these emotional scopes into the work. And sometimes they are contrasting. So these monstrous characters, these freaks that populate the work, even though they are born out of toxicity and justice and violence, they want something beyond survival. They really want to sing loud, they want to dance, they want to sweat, they want to be ecstatic. They want to be ecstatic. So music, I think, is a great medium to reach ecstatic moments, whether it is on a dancing floor, in a karaoke party, when you sing together in a demonstration, if you are part of a choir, even if you sing out of tune. Singing also, music brings like this emotional energy into the work and the possibility of ecstasy. And here again, I relate again to José Esteban Muñoz's claim that queerness ecstasy is, and I will quote, a path and a movement to a greater openness to the world. So ecstatic time would interrupt this heterogeneous normative straight time in order to bring in moments of ecstasy and pleasure that are central in my work, in spite or despite all forms of darkness that we are witnessing in this present time.
Thank you so much, Naomi. I would add there, as you perhaps as you said before, like so finding a rhythm, how to live in these dark times, how to find a rhythm to live in all that also noise around us. And I don't know, Naomi, Beatriz, Laura, I think it could be time to open up to the audience that is joining in from all around the world. So yeah, we have got already one question from the Q&A. So please, meanwhile, while I will share these questions, the rest of you who have joined us, don't hesitate to share whatever you would like to know. As you have realized, Naomi is very generous in sharing her experiences, her references. So Liv is saying, there have been so many great references, thinkers mentioned. Thank you. Do you have any fiction writers that you recommend, favorite books? And if not fiction, which non-fiction book would you recommend starting with of all the references mentioned today?
Well, I would definitely recommend, I think I would even have to get royalties because I've been talking so much about this book. No, I would recommend definitely a book by Mariana Enriquez, Argentinian writer. Mariana Enriquez, the book is called Our Share of Night, Nuestra Parte de Noche. I think it's translated as Our Share of Night. Do you know, Nina? Yeah, no? Mariana Enriquez, I think is our...
So someone put that reference in the chat, please. Thank you for the interpreter.
Yes, yes.
And it's a work which deals a lot with a sort of political horror, and it's, you know, it travels from, it accompanies the travel of a man who is part of a dark order or a dark sect in the moments of the Argentinian dictatorship. So it's a story of ghosts of the past, of very dark energies, but it also overlaps with the time of the Argentinian dictatorship, and later on with the crisis of AIDS, and with the moment of the boom of the use of psychedelic drugs in the 70s. So it's also a transtemporal journey through different realities that connect the living and the dead in a very intimate way. And in terms of science fiction, well, I think that is a classic, but I love her work. I would recommend Octavia Butler's The Parable of the Sower, and also Kindred, and what's called this Xenogenesis trilogy. Is that what it's called? Beatriz, do you remember? Xenogenesis, I think.
I
it's
feel
called.
like I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but Exogenesis, I can put in a chat.
Yes, and which of the book? Well, in terms of non-fiction or theoretical references, I would definitely mention Rita Laura Segato, the new forms of war and the bodies of women. I don't remember how it's called, Las nuevas formas de guerra en el cuerpo de las mujeres, but I don't know how is it translated to English. But it helps a lot to understand how women bodies have become the canvas in which the patriarchal order inscribes its violent marks, and the relation between the destruction of the female body and the destruction of the territory, as well as her book, Rita Laura Segato's book, Counter Pedagogies of Cruelty, Contrapedagogías de la Crueldad. And the book talking about Mexican science fiction, Itala Schmelz's Código-fagia, which is a fantastic journey through the Mexican sci-fi from the 60s till the present moment.
Do you know if this one is translated, Naomi? I don't think so. No, I'm trying to fast Google, but yeah. Oh, I should not have said that. Sorry.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't think so. Yeah. It's quite a recent book.
Yes.
But in case you read Spanish or you're patient enough to use Google Translate, Itala Schmel's Código is an excellent book.
I'm
I will
gonna
share the link. Yeah.
I'm just going to reinforce the recommendation on Parables of the Sower, because also the book starts in 2024. So if you need like a letter from the past, should we start next year? It's a pretty brutal letter, but it does address a lot of the things that we were talking about in terms of environmental catastrophe and how that intersects with gender and race, etc. So I think it's a good time to start next year. Yeah.
Leaf is saying thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Leaf, for joining in. At the moment, I don't see any other question from the people who join us in. Laura, Beatriz, is there something that you would like to add, or Naomi, that you would like to share? It's like in relation to all the different things that came up.
I could ask another question.
Go ahead.
I mean,
ahead.
I have like millions of questions, but I think just to go a bit deeper on something that you actually already said, because you're already talking about myths and also drawing a lot from Munoz to, I guess, expand on the ideas of queering mythology. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask was actually I'll draw from David Graeber and David Wengrow's recent book, their bestseller, hyper-quoted, but very much worth it, which is here as well for Liv, if you're interested. It's called The Dawn of Everything, and this book contests in quite detail what is understood as like inevitable in Western society, and things like the formation of empire, like state control, social inequality, like all of this, bringing like historical and archaeological evidence to show how humanity has existed and continue to exist otherwise in different ways. And they would talk a lot about myths. They end the book, in fact, saying that, we know that we live in the presence of myths, to reference capitalism. And I know that you reference Mesoamerican mythology, which is a lot less damaging than capitalist mythology, but it's not perfect either. And you already were talking about how like criticizing Mesoamerican mythology from a queer and feminist perspective, and how myths can be used to, I guess, also impose ways of living upon us. But I was really interested in like how sometimes we live and work with certain elements that might go against what we believe in, and like that's like a way of like inhabiting contradictions. I'm really interested in the idea of like choosing to inhabit those contradictions. So I just wanted to know why you insist in those mythologies, like how you're utilizing them for the benefit of your communities. And then if you can just like talk in more specific ways on how they translate in the trilogy. Sorry, that's a huge question to finish, but thank you.
Yes. Well, I will try to reply quickly why I insist in these mythologies. As I said before, I think that we have to bring myths, practices, ontologies, forms of relationality that oppose the extractive mind, or this capitalist worldview that understands everything as a potential thing to become a property and to make a profit maker. So I insist on Mesoamerican myths because I think they carry the potential to provide narratives that are, and metaphors that imagine futurities that are based in a pluriversal mindset, where human and non-human subjectivities and perspectives meet, and they give an account of a simultaneity of different modes of relationality between plants, animals, minerals, ancestors and future generations, as well as different understandings of time, duration, and relation with the death, and also the idea of the cycles of time, the cyclical understandings of times as not only cycles, but these overlapping spirals of time. And so that also allows for the times of the return, and this idea of a past that has been unfinished, or also past stories that have been interrupted as undetonated energies that we can still explore if we think about futurity in the midst of this planetary cataclysm.
Thank you so
That was
much,
a
Naomi.
very concise answer, Naomi. Yeah, we have only a few minutes left. So Nigel, could you join us here? That would be very nice, yeah.
Well, I suppose what I'm really struck by is, one, just the generosity of information and research and reference points and histories and context that has been brought to the table this evening. One of the sort of core aspects of the mission of Artis Mundi, within our statement, is to create space or provide a platform for stimulating dialogue and stimulating discussion that allows us or opens up areas where we might be able to learn more about ourselves and about others, and learn from cultures that are both familiar and unfamiliar. And certainly, I think this discussion today has certainly created that, in terms of the multiplicity of possibilities and the complex and complicated material, sonic, visual, narrative, multi-layered nature of this mixture that you refer to, that I think is very present in Naomi's work, and one that is created with humor and with a set of touchstones and conditions that are very much rooted in our world today, in all its excitement and problem and joy and fear. So for me, the amount of information processing that has been generated by tonight is really wonderful, and I'm sure the audience is tuning in from home, wherever they may be in the world, will have got a very rich seam of things to follow up with. So thank you to everyone at home, wherever you are, for listening in. Thank you to Julie and to Nikki, our BSL interpreters this evening. Thank you to Maria for the captioning, to the Artis Mundi team behind the scenes, Letty and Jane especially. And I should also say great thanks to our partners, the British Council, who have provided the very necessary support for this whole series of talks with the 7 artists we're working with as part of Artis Mundi 10. The next talk is with Rushdie Anwar, and that is at a different time of the day, Greenwich Mean Time. It's at 1 p.m, so a lunchtime talk, primarily because of the joys of online allow us to bring contributors and voices from all around the world in very different time zones. So the complexity of arranging that was slightly easier with this panel, but others we bring together people who are far more from further afield around in northern and southern hemisphere. So do tune in to and purchase the tickets, and we'll ensure that the Eventbrite glitch with the link that happened at the beginning of this evening is ironed out. We'll be speaking to the technologists about whatever the technologists do to make sure things work properly and sort that out. So thanks again for you all for tuning in. Thanks again to the panelists.
Thank you very much.
Laura, Nina,
Thank you.
Beatrice, and of course to Naomi.
Thank you so much.
See you all soon.
Bye.
Thank you very
all.
much.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
one. Bye
Thank
bye.
you.
night.
Bye bye.
Thank you.